later, he was named president of the union, however, about transitioning to academia. However, tomorrow, he completes the first year of a 3-year appointment. Forsee has deep Missouri roots. He is a Kansas City native and a graduate of the University of Missouri-Rolla. Gary Forsee is with me in studio. President Forsee, welcome. So nice to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Don, thanks for having me this morning.
You know, much was made of the fact when you became president of the institution that you were making that transition that I mentioned from the corporate world. And some people are a little bit uneasy about that. You're just completing your first year in that position. How do you see that transition? How has it worked for you, and if so, against you?
So it's a year tomorrow. Wow.
A year tomorrow, February 18th.
Time flies. Well, look, it's been for me, an incredible experience, and I came in a year ago with a lot to learn and wanted to make it very clear to faculty, to staff, to students that for me it was an opportunity to learn, to go back to school, but also they would know at the end of the day I was going to be their biggest advocate, their biggest spokesperson for all things that the university needs to do to be successful in the future. So 1 year is not a long time to assess, both my learning prowess, but certainly for me it's been an opportunity to learn about the university in ways that have enabled me, I think, to convey just how important we are to the state, how important we are to our economy, how important we are to the citizens as we prepare, the sons and daughters of Missourians to be very productive members of society. So I've learned a lot more to learn, and certainly in this particular challenging time, a chance to be sure that we focus on the right things.
This is a particularly challenging time, and of course you had no idea coming in you were going to be facing what has happened during the last year. But what I was getting to was the fact that the corporate skills that you acquired over an entire career, how can they be employed best in this position given the economic circumstances?
Well, managing or leading large organizations, you find out very quickly it's all about people. It's all about the skills that are resident in the people in the organization. In our case, obviously, faculty, and in cases in the corporate world, obviously, the employees. So you have to be sure that you're empowering the organization to understand their role and understand the important role that they play in helping find solutions. So this is not a matter of trying to make the academic environment work like a business. It's simply a matter of some business principles being applied to help us analyze and help us look at facts that can make a difference. So I get asked the question a lot, well, what is it like to be, trying to turn the academic world into a business world? That's not the case at all. It's a case of, hopefully some tools that can be applied, by the way, in both directions.
Well, you've had to do a lot of analyzing and make a lot of decisions during this first year. Where is the university now, specifically regarding the economic situation and changes that you feel you've had to make and have to make ahead of you?
Well, I described it to our curators 2 weeks ago in our meeting that we are, like everybody else, in a version of a perfect storm. There's pressure that comes in from aspects of students' ability to handle tuition load, and we've had a record of raising tuition at the time the state's budget has been cut in the past 8 years. Obviously there's pressure on the state component of our funding, and as the state revenues have fallen, then that puts pressure on, can we rely on a predictable source of funding. Our ability to raise money from great supporters of the university, and had a review here this morning in St. Louis about progress we're making there. We've had a great period of time the last 4 or 5 years in raising money, and our endowment has been increased as a result of that. But at the same time, we know pressure that foundations are under now because of the economic impact on their portfolios, and individuals will be perhaps impacted as well. We are finding that in tough times, individuals realize how important it is to support those institutions that have relied on it. So again, somewhat with fingers crossed today, we hope that element will sustain. And the final piece is our ability to continue to use the university as an economic growth engine for the state, and our reliance on federal research dollars and the support that we've gotten to increase our ability to commercialize some of the research that goes on in the university, can be an important place for us to go. So all of those come into that perfect storm, and all of them have challenges as we look at where we are today.
Has that perfect storm resulted in and necessitated cuts to this point?
Well, we, like every individual or every institution, starting last summer, started to see this recession developing, and we started as quickly, perhaps as anybody did at that point in time, of trying to take prudent actions to avoid having to do things that would directly or more directly impact our mission of service, teaching, research, and economic development. So we tightened down expense levels, last fall. We put a force freeze in place last fall. We started to look even further at ancillary expenses, all under the banner of, again, protecting our mission and frankly, to try to avoid layoffs, which, would have loomed if the state's budget situation, which we were asked to look at 15, 20, and 25% budget cut scenarios. So all of the actions that we've done thus far have been to preserve that future. And obviously, as we communicate that, there's lots of confusing messages. One of the reasons I'm out on the road the next couple of weeks, with these town hall meetings, is to be sure that we can communicate to all of the university family why these actions have been layered in, and the intent is to protect our mission. And I also want our associates to know that we're doing that with their best interests in mind. And I want them to obviously understand that we're taking all of these very complicated dimensions and doing that with the university and with the individuals' best interests in mind as we try to figure that out.
We should clarify that is what you're up to right now. You're visiting all of the campuses to do just exactly as you described. Well, one of the things we've been reading, and I'm sure this is something you're coming to a lot of discussion on, is the pension issue, and that is that there is some resistance to the notion that you're asking faculty and employees to put more of their own money into the pension. Is that a fait accompli? Is that going to happen, period? End of report?
Yes, it is going to happen, and has happened as a result of the vote that the curators took to approve the action that was recommended. And again, that is part of the discussion that I want to have as I visit around the campuses, as our human resource vice president has been doing as well, to go back out now and be sure that there's a clear context about that type of action. But I should also say that it's also done in the context where we know across our 4 campuses that our salaries are not as competitive and not where they need to be for us to be as successful in the future as we want to be. And I've been the loudest advocate of that. And last year we brought $7 million incrementally into the budget on top of our 4% budget increase in order to deal with ranked faculty salary adjustments. So I'm going to continue to turn over every stone that's out there to try to find ways of dealing with the salary and the competitiveness of that. At the same time, though, we have a defined benefit plan, and that defined benefit plan sets an expectation for individuals working at the university that there will be a fully funded pension as they complete, their service with the university and long careers, which has been, again, a part of the overall plan design. It's been very well thought through historically. But when you put together a number of very difficult economic years, which you go back in the early 2000 period of time, we had that bubble, and now look at the last couple of years, we know as we project out, looking at the pension plan, that we could have a very significant university liability in order for that pension plan to be fully funded. So we had to look at an incremental funding requirement of up to $100 million in that, looking out 4 or 5 year period of time, and say to ourselves, what's the likelihood of university by itself being able to step up to that level of incremental funding without asking the employees to participate in that? So this, again, is making an assumption that we will be able to close that gap by this step that we've taken. No plans for future steps, not precluding that we may not need to come back in the future, but certainly no plan to do that. And these dollars are going toward that pension plan. They're not going to plug some other hole in the budget or to being used for some other purpose. So I want to be clear about that. So again, a prudent action to be taken. There's been lots of discussion about, is this a backdoor salary cut? Well, I can't think of it that way, because I'm also out advocating for the salary part of the discussion. But this is taking action when we had information available to us that is a clear and present issue that we'll be facing with a pension plan.
Just out of curiosity, how is that pension plan money invested?
It's invested in a wide portfolio, a market basket of approaches, and I think our curators have done a very good job over the last however many 20 years, decades, of having a conservative bent on that. Obviously, with that type of bent, sometimes you may miss the peaks, but you're also not quite as impacted in the valleys. And I think our results are probably slightly better, not dramatically better, but slightly better than what may be the average because of that investment strategy. We just had a full review at the last curators meeting about our manager, that we use external resources to help us manage that portfolio.
But am I correct in assuming that most of it is in the stock market?
Well, there's a fair amount of that's in the equities market, in the stock market, and again, that looks like everybody else's stock.
That doesn't help your numbers very much these days.
And again, thus the need to look for what that rolls forward with in the value to pension plan. And the worst thing that we would want to have happen would have a unfunded liability out there into the future. Again, I'm thinking of this as a 5 to 10 year issue, not a current issue. This is a 5 to 10. How do we protect those that set an expectation as they came to work for the university? And that's what makes the communication a little bit challenging, is someone saying, well, gee, here's the here and now, and we may get some federal stimulus help, but that's not going to help this pension plan issue, which people may rely on 15 or 20 years from now. So our obligation was to, again, do both. We've got to deal with the salary issue, which I remain committed and said as much at the curators meeting, as well as we've got a responsibility to preserve the value of that pension plan.
That's Gary Forsee. He is the president of the University of Missouri System. He's our guest on St. Louis on the Air today. We're going to continue our discussion in just a moment. We'll come back, and ultimately, in a very few minutes, we'll start taking your calls as well, if you have calls for President Forsee. We're going to take our break now. This is St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh.
You're listening to a simulcast with KWMU St. Louis and KBIA Columbia. Support for KBIA comes from the National Churchill Museum on the campus of Westminster College in Fulton, whose monthly speaker series continues Tuesday, February 24th at 6 with featured speaker Dr. Carolyn Perry, Interim Dean of Faculty and Professor of English. The topic is learning how to record the stories in your life, or how to write your own life story. This event is open to the public. More information available at 573-592-6242. Support for KBIA comes from Rochefort's Historic Schoolhouse Bed and Breakfast Inn, offering Rochefort's shops, the Bourgeois Winery, and fine dining. You can complete your visit with a stay in class at the Schoolhouse Bed and Breakfast Inn. Information and reservations at schoolhousebb.com. This is KBIA.
Hello again, and welcome back to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. My guest in studio is Gary Forsee, the president of the University of Missouri System. Greetings to the listeners of KBIA at the University of Missouri in Columbia. They're with us today. And if folks want to get in on the conversation, we encourage your calls. The number is 314-382-8255 or 314-382-TALK. We'd very much like to hear from you. Email us, please, at talk@kwmu.org. President Forsee, another issue that is getting a lot of attention these days is the issue of furloughs. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that you do have the authority to get into the furlough area if necessary. Could you kind of elaborate on that? Where does that stand?